Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Healthy Kidneys After 60, the space where we peel back the layers of aging to find the vibrant health every senior deserves. I am your host, Jane Pauley. Today, we are touching on a topic that hits close to home for so many of us, that sudden realization that our legs just do not carry us the way they used to. We often blame the candles on our birthday cake. But what if the culprit is actually sitting right inside your medicine cabinet? To help us navigate this, I am deeply honored to welcome a man who has dedicated his life to the intersection of neurosurgery and public health, a voice of clarity for over 20 Phe 001 patients, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Doctor, thank you for being here with us.
It is a profound pleasure to be here, Jane. You know, in all my years in the operating room and out in the field, I have realized that the most powerful tool we have is not a scalpel, but the right information. I see so many of our elders, people with so much wisdom and life left to give, slowly retreating from the world because their legs feel like lead or because they are terrified of a fall. They think it is just the inevitable march of time, but many times it is a reversible mistake they are making every morning with their breakfast. I am here today because I want to help our listeners reclaim that freedom of movement, and I am truly grateful for the chance to share these stories with your community.
Doctor, I want to start with something I hear from my friends and neighbors all the time, and frankly, something I feel myself some mornings. You are sitting in your favorite armchair, you go to stand up to answer the door or get a glass of water, and there is this hesitation. Your legs feel heavy, almost like they are anchored to the floor. Most of us just sigh and say, well, I am not 70 anymore, or that is just what happens when you get older. But you have suggested that this rapid decline in leg strength, this feeling that our foundation is crumbling, might not be a natural part of aging at all. In fact, you have pointed towards something quite startling, that the very supplements we take to stay healthy might be the invisible hand pushing us toward that chair. Could you help us understand why our legs seem to age so much faster than the rest of us? And is it really possible that our vitamins are to blame?
Jane, that is the million-dollar question, and the answer is both fascinating and a bit heartbreaking because it is so often overlooked. When we talk about the legs, we are talking about the most demanding muscles in the human body. They require an enormous, constant supply of oxygenated blood and precise neurological signals to function. Think of your legs like a high-performance vehicle. For that vehicle to move, the fuel lines must be clear and the electrical system must be firing perfectly. What we are seeing now, backed by significant research from the American Heart Association, is that certain high-dose vitamins that seniors take religiously can actually act like gunk in those fuel lines. For instance, many people take specific forms of calcium or synthetic vitamins thinking they are fortifying their engine, but in reality they are causing the blood vessels to stiffen. When those vessels in the legs harden, the blood flow drops. Your muscles are essentially starving for oxygen every time you try to stand up. It is not that your legs are old in terms of years, it is that they are being malnourished and suffocated by the very things you thought were helping. I have walked into rooms with patients who were ready to buy a wheelchair, convinced their walking days were over, only to find out their arteries were being calcified by a pill they bought at a local pharmacy.
That is a chilling thought, Doctor. The idea that our quest for health is actually accelerating our frailty. I think about the millions of people who wake up and take a handful of supplements as a ritual of self-care. They do it out of love for their bodies and a desire to stay independent. To hear that this ritual could be suffocating their muscles, as you put it, is a huge wake-up call. It makes me wonder about the mechanics of it all. We are told calcium for strong bones from the time we are children. It is ingrained in our culture. How does something so universally praised turn into a silent enemy for a 60 or 70-year-old? Is it a matter of the body changing how it processes these things, or have the products themselves changed over the years?
It is a combination of both, Jane, but the biological shift is the most critical part. When we are younger, our bodies are incredibly resilient and efficient at directing nutrients exactly where they need to go. But as we cross that 60-year threshold, our metabolic pathways become more selective and sometimes more easily overwhelmed. The calcium for bones narrative is a perfect example. If you take a high-dose calcium carbonate supplement without the necessary cofactors, that calcium doesn't just find your bones like a heat-seeking missile. Instead, it wanders through your bloodstream. And where does it go? It settles in the soft tissues, your heart valves, and crucially, the long arteries of your legs. We call this vascular calcification. It literally turns your flexible, pulsing blood vessels into rigid pipes. Imagine trying to water a garden with a hose that has turned to stone. The water just can't get through. This is why you see seniors who have plenty of muscle mass but no power. Their muscles are gasping for breath. Moreover, many of these synthetic vitamins are produced in dosages that are far higher than anything nature ever intended for a human at this stage of life. We have been sold a more is better philosophy, but for the aging body, basically right is much better than more. We are seeing a silent epidemic of stiff leg syndrome caused by supplement-induced arterial stiffness, and it is something we need to address with urgency before more people lose their ability to walk down their own driveway.
Doctor, your explanation about the stiffening of the arteries is truly eye-opening, and it brings me to a very sensitive point that many of our listeners face every single day. I have spoken to so many seniors who confess that their world is slowly shrinking, not because they want to stay home, but because they are terrified of that one misstep, that one stumble that could change everything forever. It is a quiet, gnawing fear of falling that keeps them from the garden, from the grocery store, and even from playing with their grandchildren on the floor. When you sit across from a patient who is losing their confidence and their mobility, how do you bridge that gap between the physical symptoms they feel in their heavy legs and the invisible damage being done by the very habits they think are protecting them?
Jane, you have touched on the most emotional part of my practice because a fall for a senior is rarely just a physical injury. It is a loss of sovereignty. I remember so vividly a patient of mine named Robert Miller, a 72-year-old gentleman from Ohio who came to see me with his daughter. Robert had been an avid walker his whole life, but he told me that lately, every time he stood up from his porch swing, his legs felt like they were made of concrete, and he had recently suffered a terrifying slip in his kitchen that left him shaken to his core. He looked at me with such earnest eyes and said that he had been doing everything right, including taking high-dose calcium carbonate every single morning for years because he was terrified of his bones becoming brittle as he aged. What Robert didn't realize, and what many people don't know, is that by flooding his system with that specific cheap form of calcium, he was inadvertently turning his femoral arteries into something resembling a limestone pipe. When I looked at his scans, I could see the calcification clearly. His leg muscles were screaming for blood that simply couldn't reach them, which led to the muscle fatigue and the eventual fall. It is a tragic irony that his fear of a broken bone led him to take a supplement that actually increased his risk of falling by weakening his muscle response and balance.
It is heartbreaking to think of Robert, and so many like him, sitting on that porch swing, feeling betrayed by their own bodies, while they were actually trying so hard to be proactive. That connection between the heart, the blood flow, and the sheer stability of our legs is something we rarely discuss in the same breath. Yet it seems to be the very foundation of our independence. When you have to break the news to someone like Robert that the bone insurance he was taking was actually the thing stealing his balance, how do you help them navigate that confusion? And what does it tell us about the deeper relationship between our cardiovascular health and our ability to simply walk across a room without fear?
Breaking that news requires a lot of empathy because you are essentially telling someone that their well-intentioned efforts were counterproductive, which is a hard pill to swallow. I told Robert that his body wasn't failing him because of age, but because of a traffic jam in his circulatory system caused by that excess calcium carbonate. You see, when the arteries in the legs harden, the nerves also suffer because they aren't getting the nutrients they need to send lightning-fast signals to the brain about where the foot is positioned. That is why Robert felt loopy and unstable. His brain was getting laggy data from his feet. This creates a vicious cycle where the fear of falling leads to less movement, and less movement leads to even weaker muscles and stiffer joints. I spent a long time explaining to him that we had to stop the supplements and focus on clearing those pathways through diet and proper hydration. It was a long journey for him, but the moment he understood that his heavy legs were a symptom of a treatable circulatory issue rather than an inevitable decay, you could see the light come back into his eyes. We have to realize that our legs are the furthest point from our heart, and they are the first to suffer when the blood vessels lose their elasticity, making them the ultimate canary in the coal mine for our overall longevity and safety.
It sounds like we have been operating under a massive misunderstanding for decades, believing that a pill could replace the complex symphony of nutrients our bodies actually need. Many of us grew up in an era where more calcium was the golden rule for anyone over 50, and it is almost a shock to the system to hear that the most common form, calcium carbonate, might be doing more harm than good for our mobility. If we have been misled by these marketing promises of stronger bones at the expense of our arterial health, how do we begin to untangle that web? Is there a way to support our skeletal structure without sacrificing the very blood flow that keeps our legs moving and our balance intact?
You are absolutely right, Jane. We have been conditioned to think of the body as a collection of separate parts, bones here, heart there, muscles somewhere else, but it is all one interconnected web. The tragedy of the calcium carbonate craze is that it's a very poorly absorbed form of the mineral. It's basically chalk, and the body doesn't know what to do with it in high doses. I often tell my patients to think of their leg muscles like a high-performance engine. That engine needs fuel, which is blood, but if you keep throwing sand into the fuel lines, which is what excess unabsorbed calcium does, the engine is going to sputter and stall. Research has shown that when we take these massive doses in pill form, we get a spike in blood calcium levels that the body simply can't handle, leading to that dangerous deposition in the arteries of the legs. The solution isn't to stop getting calcium, but to change the source and the delivery system entirely. We need to go back to the way our ancestors did it, getting our minerals from whole foods like plain yogurt, leafy greens, and sardines, where the calcium is bound to proteins and fats that help it reach the bones instead of the blood vessels.
It is fascinating to realize that the simplicity of a bowl of yogurt or a salad might be more powerful than the most expensive supplement bottle on the shelf. We often look for the magic bullet in a pharmacy, but it seems the real magic is in the synergy of real food that our bodies actually recognize. When you transition your patients away from these heavy tablets and back toward a more natural approach, what kind of changes do they notice in the way their legs feel, and how quickly does the body respond when we stop clogging the pipes and start nourishing the system properly?
The transition is often remarkable, not just physically but mentally, because the heaviness begins to lift. When a patient stops the high-dose carbonate and starts focusing on dietary calcium along with cofactors like vitamin K2, which acts like a crossing guard to direct calcium into the bones and out of the arteries, the legs start to feel lighter and more responsive within weeks. I have seen people who previously struggled to walk to the mailbox start taking daily strolls again because their muscles are finally getting the oxygen they crave. It is about restoring the natural flow and realizing that our legs are not just pillars of bone. They are dynamic living tissues that require a delicate balance of minerals. I always tell people that if you want to keep your legs strong and your gait steady after 60, you have to stop treating your body like a construction site where you just dump raw materials and start treating it like a garden that needs careful, balanced nourishment. It's about quality, not quantity. And once you make that shift, your legs will reward you with a level of freedom you thought was gone forever.
We have talked about the hidden dangers of calcium, but there is another vitamin that many of us reach for, thinking it is the ultimate protector of our cells and our skin, vitamin E. It has this reputation for being a powerful antioxidant, and I know many seniors take it religiously, hoping to ward off the effects of time. But I have been reading some concerning reports, and I know you have seen this in your clinic as well, where high doses of this specific vitamin might actually be interfering with the very nerve signals we need to keep our legs steady. How does something that is supposed to protect our cells end up potentially sabotaging our balance and making us feel disconnected from our own feet?
This is a particularly tricky one, Jane, because vitamin E is essential, but in its synthetic, high-dose form, it can become a neurotoxic burden for the elderly. I remember a patient, Margaret Wilson, a 68-year-old woman living in Florida, who came to see me because she felt like she was walking on marshmallows. She had no pain, but she was constantly losing her balance and felt a strange numbness in her toes that made her terrified to go downstairs. Margaret was a health enthusiast and had been taking 800 IUS of synthetic vitamin E for years, believing it would keep her heart and brain young. What she didn't realize was that such high doses, especially of the alpha tocopherol variety found in most supplements, can actually cause a thinning of the blood to a dangerous degree and interfere with the delicate lipid membranes of the nerves in the lower extremities. The SELECT trial and other major studies have warned us about this. High-dose vitamin E can actually increase the risk of hemorrhagic issues and surprisingly contribute to nerve dysfunction in the legs.
Walking on marshmallows, that is such a vivid and frightening way to describe it. To lose that tactile connection with the ground must be incredibly disorienting, especially for someone like Margaret who was just trying to stay healthy. It is as if the very shield she was trying to build around her health became a barrier between her brain and her feet. When you see a case like this, where a supplement is effectively numbing the body's primary sensors, how do you explain the science behind that disconnect to a patient who feels like they are losing their grip on reality?
I explained to Margaret that her nerves are like high-speed data cables and they rely on a very specific chemical environment to send signals about balance and position. When you flood that environment with too much vitamin E, you are essentially muffling the signal. It's like trying to listen to a whisper in a room where a loud fan is blowing. The signal is there, but the brain can't distinguish it from the noise. For Margaret, this meant her brain didn't know exactly where her feet were in space, leading to that marshmallow feeling and her frequent stumbles. We had to immediately scale back her supplements and focus on getting vitamin E from natural sources like almonds, sunflower seeds, and spinach, where it exists in a balanced complex of different tocopherols. Once we cleared the excess synthetic vitamin E from her system, the noise subsided and her nerves could finally hear the ground again. It is a powerful reminder that when it comes to the nervous system of a senior, more is definitely not better. It is often a recipe for sensory confusion and a direct path to a dangerous fall.
It is fascinating and a bit frightening to realize how easily we can disrupt the delicate electrical system of our bodies with just a few pills. But there is another element we often associate with strength and energy, and that is iron. We are told from a young age that iron is what makes our blood strong. And many people, as they feel the fatigue of their 60s and 70s, start taking iron supplements to get that spark back. Yet, you have mentioned that for many seniors, especially those who aren't actually anemic, this extra iron can act like a weight dragging their muscles down. How does a mineral that is supposed to give us energy end up making our legs feel heavy and exhausted before we even reach the end of the block?
Iron is a double-edged sword, Jane, and for the aging population, the edge is often sharper than they realize. Unlike younger people, seniors don't have an easy way to get rid of excess iron once it's in the body, and it begins to accumulate in the tissues, including the muscles of the legs. This leads to something we call oxidative stress. Imagine your muscle cells have little power plants inside them called mitochondria. When there is too much iron around, it creates a rusting effect, literally a chemical reaction that damages these power plants. I saw this clearly in a patient named James Anderson, a 79-year-old from California. James was a former marathon runner who couldn't understand why his legs felt like lead after just 5 minutes of walking. He had been taking an iron-rich multivitamin because he felt tired, but blood tests revealed his ferritin levels were sky high. His leg muscles weren't weak, they were just exhausted because their internal power plants were being choked by iron-induced inflammation.
The image of our muscles rusting from the inside is something that will stay with me. It's a perfect metaphor for that heavy, sluggish feeling that so many people just accept as old age. It makes me think about all those silver multivitamins that are marketed to us. Are we blindly consuming things that are effectively sabotaging our stamina if the very thing we take to combat fatigue is causing a chemical fire in our muscles? How do we help people like James find their real energy again without falling into the trap of oversupplementation?
The first step is to realize that fatigue in your 70s is rarely an iron deficiency unless there is internal bleeding or a very specific medical condition. For James, the silver multivitamins were actually his biggest enemy. I told him that his body was like a warehouse that was already full, and he kept trying to shove more crates through the door. We stopped the iron supplements immediately and switched him to a diet rich in antioxidants like blueberries and dark leafy greens to help quench that oxidative fire in his muscles. We also looked at his protein intake to ensure his muscles had the actual building blocks they needed, rather than just more rusting agents. Within a few months, James told me he felt like the lead weights had been removed from his ankles. It is a vital lesson for all of us. Your legs aren't just tired because you are old, they might be tired because they are being chemically overwhelmed. We have to be very careful with minerals like iron after 60 because what once gave us strength can very easily become the weight that keeps us pinned to the chair.
We have covered so much ground today, from the stiffening caused by calcium to the numbing of vitamin E and the rusting of iron. It is a lot for anyone to process, and I can imagine our listeners are starting to look at their own legs with a bit of suspicion. We often ignore the small things, a little tingling here, a bit of heaviness there, until we actually have a fall or can't get up. But you have said that the body is actually quite vocal if we know how to listen. What are those early, subtle whispers from our legs that we shouldn't be dismissing as just part of getting older? And how can we distinguish between normal aging and a red flag that our supplements are causing damage?
You are so right, Jane. The body is always talking, but we have been taught to tune it out. The most common early warning sign isn't a sudden collapse, it is a change in the quality of your movement. I often think of James Anderson, again, that gentleman from California we discussed. Before his legs felt like lead, he noticed that he was starting to shuffle his feet just a little bit more, especially on carpet. He also mentioned that his legs felt restless at night, almost like a buzzing sensation deep in the muscles. These aren't just quirks of age, they are signs that the microcirculation or the nerve conduction in the legs is being compromised. If you find yourself holding onto the furniture as you walk through the house, or if you feel a heaviness that doesn't go away after a short rest, your body is waving a yellow flag. Another big one is a loss of proprioception. That's a fancy word for knowing where your feet are without looking at them. If you find you have to look down at your feet to feel safe walking, that is a major sign that something is interfering with your sensory nerves.
Shuffling on the carpet, needing to look at your feet. Those are such relatable everyday moments that many of us just push through without a second thought. It's easy to tell yourself, oh, I'm just tired today, or I need to be more careful. But what you're saying is that these are actually urgent messages from our physiology. When someone notices these signs and they start to realize it might be linked to their daily vitamin routine, what is the first step they should take to listen more effectively and stop the progression before it becomes a crisis?
The very first thing is to do a medicine cabinet audit. Literally take everything out and look at the labels. Are you taking a high-dose calcium carbonate? Is your vitamin E over 400 IUs? Does your multivitamin have iron you don't need? I told James that he needed to become his own detective. I tell my patients to keep a simple journal. How do your legs feel 30 minutes after you take your pills? How do they feel in the morning versus the evening? If the heaviness or the tingling peaks after your supplement routine, that is a smoking gun. We have to stop accepting frailty as an inevitable destination. If you catch these signs early, the shuffling, the restlessness, the marshmallow feet, you can often reverse the damage just by simplifying your regimen and giving your body a chance to clear out the excess. Don't wait for a fall to be your wake-up call. Let the way you walk across your living room be the conversation you have with your health today.
This idea of a medicine cabinet audit is so practical, but I want to dive into a specific trap that I think many of us fall into, and that is the world of B vitamins. We are told they are great for energy and nerve health, but there is this specific one, folic acid, that seems to be everywhere, from our bread to our multivitamins. You have mentioned a very startling statistic that about 40% of Americans have a genetic quirk that makes it hard for them to process the synthetic version of this vitamin. How is it possible that something so ubiquitous could be hiding a much deeper problem, especially for seniors who are worried about their nerve health and their ability to stay balanced?
This is one of the most significant hidden issues in modern nutrition, Jane. We have been fortifying our food supply with folic acid, the synthetic form of vitamin B9, for decades to prevent birth defects. But for a senior, high levels of synthetic folic acid can be a disaster because it can mask a vitamin B12 deficiency. Think of it like a broken fire alarm. The folic acid makes your blood tests look normal, so your doctor thinks everything is fine, but meanwhile, the fire of B12 deficiency is raging in your nervous system. Since B12 is the primary fuel for the protective coating on your nerves, the myelin sheath, losing it is like having the insulation stripped off the electrical wires in your legs. You get short circuits which manifest as that terrifying loathsomeness, weakness, and loss of coordination. And as you mentioned, that 40% of people with the MTHFR genetic mutation can't even convert that folic acid into the usable form, so it just floats around in their blood, potentially causing even more neurological interference.
It is like a double-edged betrayal. Not only is the vitamin not working for a large portion of the population, but it is also acting as a cloaking device for a condition that could lead to permanent nerve damage. I think about the frustration of a patient who goes to the doctor, gets a standard blood test, and is told everything is normal, yet they can barely walk to their car. It must feel like they are being gaslit by their own biology. How do we break through this masking effect? And what should we be looking for on our labels to make sure we aren't accidentally sabotaging our nerve endings with the wrong kind of folate?
You hit the nail on the head with the word gaslit, Jane. I have seen so many patients who were told their symptoms were psychosomatic or just old age because their folic acid levels were high. To break through, we have to demand the right tests, looking at methylmalonic acid MMA or homocysteine levels, which are much more accurate indicators of what is actually happening at the cellular level. And for the labels, the word everyone needs to memorize is methylfolate. If your supplement says folic acid, put it back on the shelf. You want the methylated version because that is what the body can actually use without needing a genetic key to unlock it. It is a small change in wording on a bottle, but for your legs, it can be the difference between a nerve that fires perfectly and one that is slowly dying. We have to stop being passive consumers and start understanding that the chemical form of a vitamin is just as important as the dose, especially when our very ability to walk is on the line.
It is incredibly empowering to know that something as simple as reading a label more closely could be the key to unlocking our mobility. We often think that health requires these massive, difficult lifestyle changes, but you are suggesting that some of the most profound improvements come from these tiny surgical adjustments to what we put in our bodies. I want to talk about hope because we have discussed a lot of dangers today. Can you share a story of someone who was on the brink of losing their independence but managed to turn it all around just by making these specific methylated shifts?
I would love to tell you about Linda Thompson, a 65-year-old grandmother from Texas. Linda was a vibrant woman, but when she came to me, she was using a cane and was deeply depressed because she felt loopy and unstable whenever she tried to walk through her garden. She had been taking a high-dose senior multivitamin that was packed with folic acid and a very cheap synthetic form of B12 called cyanocobalamin. Her doctors told her she was fine, but her legs were telling a different story. They were weak and tingled constantly. I had her switch to a high-quality B12 in the form of methylcobalamin and replaced her folic acid with methylfolate. We didn't add more pills, we just upgraded the quality of what she was already taking. Within 6 weeks, Linda called me, sounding like a different person. She told me the fuzziness in her feet was gone, and she had retired her cane to the back of the closet. She was back in her garden, and most importantly, she felt connected to the ground again.
What a beautiful image, retiring the cane to the back of the closet. It really highlights that less is more philosophy you have been mentioning. It wasn't about a new miracle drug for Linda. It was about giving her body the right version of the fuel it was already trying to use. For our listeners who might feel like Linda, unsure, unstable, maybe even using a cane they didn't need a year ago, how can they start this quality over quantity journey today? Is it as simple as swapping bottles, or is there a mindset shift that needs to happen first to truly reclaim that connection to the earth?
The mindset shift is the foundation, Jane. You have to stop believing that your body is a failing machine and start seeing it as a sensitive ecosystem that is responding to what you feed it. For Linda, the shift was realizing that she wasn't broken. She was just misaligned. The first step for anyone listening is to look for those methyl prefixes on your B-complex vitamins. Methylcobalamin and methylfolate are your friends. Also, simplify. You don't need 20 different supplements. Often, by cutting out the synthetic junk and focusing on these two high-quality forms, you take a massive load off your liver and your nervous system. I tell people to give it a 30-day trial. Swap out the cheap synthetics for the methylated versions, keep your walking shoes by the door, and just notice. Most people find that their balance improves, their brain fog lifts, and that heavy feeling in the legs starts to evaporate. It is about small, precise wins that add up to a life of freedom.
We are moving toward a much clearer picture of what real leg health looks like. And it is far more nuanced than just take your vitamins. It's about precision, quality, and understanding the unique needs of a body that has seen 6 or 7 decades of life. You have mentioned some specific heroes today. Methylated B vitamins and avoiding the wrong calcium. If we were to build a gold standard foundation for anyone over 60 who wants to keep their legs strong, steady, and full of life, what would those pillars be? How do we move away from the scattershot approach of a multivitamin and toward a strategic plan that truly supports our mobility for the long haul?
To truly protect your legs after 60, you need to focus on what I call the 4 pillars of mobility. The first is magnesium glycinate. Most seniors are deficient in magnesium, which is essential for muscle relaxation and preventing those painful nighttime cramps. But the glycinate form is key because it's highly absorbable and gentle on the stomach. The second pillar is the dynamic duo of vitamin D3 and vitamin K2. D3 helps you absorb calcium from your food, but K2 is the GPS that makes sure that calcium goes into your bones and stays out of your leg arteries. Without K2, D3 can actually worsen the calcification we talked about. The third is our nerve protector, B12 methylcobalamin. This keeps the electrical insulation on your nerves intact so your balance stays sharp. And the fourth is omega-3s, specifically DHA and EPA from high-quality fish oil. These act like a lubricant for your vascular system and reduce the inflammation in your leg muscles that causes that heavy, tired feeling. This isn't about a handful of pills. It's about these 4 targeted nutrients that address the muscles, the bones, the nerves, and the blood flow all at once.
Those 4 pillars feel like a complete support system for the legs, covering everything from the electrical signals to the physical pipes and the muscle energy. It is so much more logical than just taking a random assortment of vitamins and hoping for the best. When you see a patient who embraces this targeted approach, what is the long-term outlook? Are we talking about just slowing the decline? Or is there a real possibility of regaining the kind of strength and vitality that many people think is reserved for the youth?
Jane, I have seen 80-year-olds regain the walking speed of someone 20 years younger. This is not just about slowing the decline, it is about biological optimization. When you provide the body with these 4 pillars, you are essentially removing the roadblocks that have been holding it back. I have seen patients who thought they would never hike again or never dance at their grandchild's wedding get back on their feet with a sense of vigor that surprises even them. The body is incredibly forgiving if you just stop hurting it and start helping it. Research from both the US and Europe consistently shows that when we address these specific deficiencies, especially K2 and magnesium, we see a direct correlation with better gait speed and lower fall risk. It's about building a foundation that allows you to remain independent and active, which is the ultimate goal of aging. You don't have to accept a life of heavy legs and fear of falling. By focusing on these 4 pillars, you are investing in your own freedom, and that is a dividend that pays off every single time you step out your front door.
As we wrap up this incredible conversation, I am struck by a thought. Our legs are so much more than just a way to get from point A to point B. They are our connection to the world, our ability to go where we want, when we want. They represent our autonomy, our dignity, and our very freedom. To lose that mobility because of a simple, reversible mistake in a supplement routine feels like such a preventable tragedy. Doctor, as we say goodbye to our listeners today, what is the one thing you want them to hold on to when they look down at their feet tonight? If they take only one lesson from our time together, what should it be to ensure they keep walking toward a future of independence?
Jane, if there is one thing I want everyone to remember, it is that your legs are the physical manifestation of your freedom. Every step you take is an act of independence. Don't let a bottle of cheap, poorly formulated vitamins steal that from you. We often spend so much time worrying about living longer, but what really matters is living better. And you cannot live your best life if you are afraid to walk across the room. Please take a moment to look at your supplements with the same critical eye you would use for a financial investment or a home repair. Your health is your most precious asset. If your legs feel heavy, if you are shuffling, or if you are losing your balance, don't just blame the calendar. Your body is calling for a change, and as we have discussed today, that change can be as simple as choosing the right form of a nutrient. It has been an absolute honor to share these stories and this science with you, Jane. I hope everyone listening feels empowered to take that first lighter step tomorrow. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, Dr. Gupta, for your wisdom, your compassion, and for giving us the tools to reclaim our foundation. It is a powerful reminder that aging doesn't have to mean retreating. It can mean refined, intelligent living. To all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on Healthy Kidneys After 60. We hope today's episode has given you the clarity and the courage to look at your health routine in a whole new light. Remember, your legs carry the story of your life. Let's make sure they stay strong enough to keep writing new chapters. If you found this conversation helpful, please subscribe to our podcast and share it with someone you love who might be struggling with their mobility. We have many more deep dives into the science of aging gracefully coming your way, and we don't want you to miss a single one. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of your legs, and keep moving forward with confidence. Good night, everyone.